Credit has the power to build a modern economy. By taking out a loan, an entrepreneur is able to purchase the capital they need to start creating new wealth, growing the economy. Existing businesses can take out loans to finance innovative new ideas or to smooth out the ups and downs in their revenue and operate consistently. When people go into debt for these reasons, it pays off because their incomes grow by more than the interest they have to pay on the loan. It's a little different when people take out loans to buy a car or a house or something else. In that case, a person is just moving future consumption to the present. They can't afford to pay the full price of a car right now, so they take out a loan to buy it now, reducing their future consumption in order to pay the interest on the loan. There isn't anything bad about this, but the purpose of the loan is a little different than a loan made for investment. It also isn't surprising that in the many decades leading up to the financial crisis in 2008, household debt was increasing. After all, incomes were also rising over this time period, and rising household debt levels are not a problem if these increases are in proportion to those income increases. But just prior to the financial crisis, this trend reversed. People started to pay down their household debt, and the total load of household debt declined significantly throughout the Great Recession. For the first time since the Great Depression, household debt actually declined from 2009 to 2012, after slowing significantly in 2007 and 2008. The graph on the right shows household debt payments as a percentage of disposable income, which is something we would want to see holding steady. Overall debt levels could rise, but if they rose in proportion to people's after-tax income, then this graph on the right would show a flat line. But we can see that in the early 2000s, people were taking on more debts with bigger payments until 2007, when people started to reduce their debt loads. Of course, it is no surprise that this reduction in debt was driven largely by changes in mortgage debt. After a few years of taking on a lot more debt, many Americans decided it was time to start paying it back. They bought less and devoted more of their cash to making payments. This, more than anything, explains the changes in housing prices over the same period. The boom was driven by easy credit, which led to a lot of buying, driving prices up. But when more and more people slowed their buying, prices had to come down back to earth. But how does that turn into an economic recession? Maybe it meant some bad times for real estate agents and mortgage brokers, but certainly the rest of the economy could carry on as normal, right? One theory that was resurrected after the financial crisis was initially put forward by Irving Fisher to explain the Great Depression. Yep, this is the same Irving Fisher who said stock prices had reached a permanently high plateau shortly before those same stock prices came tumbling down. Fisher saw the problem of the Great Depression as being a problem of debt deflation. In his formulation, people in the 1920s had become over-indebted, and with debt payments eating into their budgets, many decided it was time to make some sacrifices and pay those debts down before incurring any new debts. They started saying no to the salesman offering them financing on the new radio or new car. And since fewer loans were being made with the repaid money, the money supply contracted. The monetary shock led to deflation, and prices fell and profits shrank. Firms pulled back on production, output declined, and unemployment rose. I'm sure a lot of this is starting to rhyme with our other theories, and there are a lot of similarities. What puzzled Fisher and other economists enough to get them to drop this explanation for a while was why the decline would persist. Why don't lenders make new loans as the debts are being paid off? Shouldn't this just drive interest rates down to encourage more lending, bringing the economy back to normal? Not if the deleveraging also pushes down asset prices, as it did in the financial crisis. Picking up on Fisher's debt deflation hypothesis, none other than Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke, back when he was working as an academic economist, proposed financial accelerators as an explanation. When households paid back their debts prior to the Great Depression, they led to a fall in sales, which crashed the stock market. In the financial crisis of 2008, they pushed housing prices down, which reduced the value of mortgage-backed securities. People are able to get credit based on the value of their assets. They put these assets up as collateral, which could be sold in the event that the borrower can't repay the loan. The amount a person or company can borrow depends on the value of their assets, and that means the value of these assets can impact the amount of money which is used for investment. If the value of these assets crashes in a financial crisis, then the amount people and companies can borrow for investment shrinks too, and it won't increase unless the value of those assets goes back up. The collapse in asset prices accelerates the crash, and without painful deflation throughout the economy or a reinflation of those asset prices, we could get stuck at a low level of investment spending, which holds the economy down indefinitely. A mark in favor of this theory is that it works as an explanation around the world, where many countries all experienced a rise in household debt due to increased mortgage lending, fueling a boom in housing prices, which eventually crashed when people began paying down their debts. It's hard to believe that the real business cycle theory could find reasons for labor productivity to drop in each of these economies, or for the Austrian school to find excessive money creation. But importantly, not all of these economies experienced a bad recession. Australia, in particular, fared well, with only a minor blip showing up in their GDP. But the theory here, nonetheless, is that some of these economic recessions were being led by a cycle of debt. In the 1920s, people over-indebted themselves buying things like refrigerators, radios, and cars, all on easy-to-get credit. This isn't investment. It doesn't increase production and wages. Instead, it's paying for more consumption now with less consumption later. And the depression in this story was brought on by that reduction in consumption as people paid off debts. And in the early 2000s, people started buying houses with easy-to-get mortgages and taking out home equity loans on the increased values of their homes. Home equity loans allow a homeowner to borrow money based on the part of the value of their house that they've already paid off. You get a big chunk of cash now and just make bigger monthly payments. Lots of people did this to remodel their home, go on vacation, retire early, or just enjoy the extra money. But eventually, those payments got too big, and people decided it was time to pay them down. This is a compelling narrative, and it does seem to offer a lot of power in explaining the housing bubble. But it is still a bit incomplete, and it really needs to be paired with the Keynesian story to make any sense, which is indeed what its proponents do. However, one critical question is why this reversal in household debt is leading to a crazy collapse in financial markets that brings down the financial system. Why did the financial system allow itself to be so vulnerable to a change in consumer behavior like this?